Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel Tour Update. And as ever, we will start by highlighting that today we mark date 692 since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in Gaza had launched their atrocious crimes against communities of southern Israel, with the murder of 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 251 people on October 7th of 2023, that is. Since then, many were released, thankfully, both by military operations as well as partial incomplete deals, as you were. And within that context, right now, we have 50 Israeli hostages in Hamas captivity. By the way, not only Israelis. There is also, if I'm not mistaken, a Thai civilian or a Filipino civilian as well. And some of them are also, of course, dual nationals, but up to 20 of them are believed to be alive at this point in time. And we are hopeful to see all of them returned promptly and pray for their safe return. With that, we will discuss today more of the situation in the Gaza Strip, the complexities related to that. We will also briefly discuss the situation in Syria today with a very special operation reportedly taking place in Syria, and the Islamic Republic of Iran. There might be a scoop today, and I'm hopeful we will hear it soon enough. But there is a development with regard to the Iranian capacity to proliferate nuclear or enrich uranium and the international scrutiny on them with that regard. But before all of that, let's now introduce our experts for today, to start with retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, who formerly served as a U.S. Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs, among other senior positions, including here in the U.S. Central Command. Next to him is Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence at Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. And last but not least, Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, who is the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. It's great to see all three of you. And I'd like to actually start with you, General Kimmett, when we're talking specifically about a meeting that took place yesterday in the White House. President Trump chaired that meeting on the day after, so to speak, but also on the condition of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And among the various officials that were present, of course, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, two additional figures were present, which caught me somewhat by surprise, at least one of them. But we're talking, of course, about Trump's son-in-law, Kushner, who was very creative with his advice to his father-in-law with regard to the day after, vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip, and no less than the former British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who was also party in that meeting. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm glad to see they're having those conversations because, frankly, the historical legacy that remains with us from the post-war occupation of Iraq, I think still smarts, and it is certainly something that President Trump has referred to many, many times. It is interesting that Tony Blair was there. I don't know if he was there because he was summoned or volunteered. But if you're looking for a proconsul to be inside of Gaza in a post-war environment, maybe that's not a bad choice. But there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm glad the United States is thinking about it and pulling out a few books that have been written about the mistakes that we made in the early part of the occupation in Iraq.
Indeed. Well, General Sofrin, I'd like to hear your take on that at a time when, of course, the IDF continues to prepare itself, not only planning-wise, but also in the field ahead of the looming offensive to take over Gaza City.
The Israeli government decided and ordered the armed forces to take full control on Gaza City itself. which is the heart and the core of the Gaza Strip. Now, this is something that had to be a prolonged process because, first of all, you have to evacuate all the people and send them back southwards to the area of the Muasi, and very close to the Israeli-Egyptian border. Second, on the first phase, we will encircle Gaza, and only then you can get in and go very slowly and operate very slowly because maybe, and there is high probability that people that were abducted by the Hamas on October 7, 2023 are still held and captive in this area. So we have to work very carefully not to harm these people that are still alive, those about 20 people that everybody mentions. And therefore, we have to, first of all, it is a long process. It will take a long time, even though the government is driving the army to make it shorter and faster, but it will take time because, first of all, you have, as I said, to evacuate all the people to make sure that no residents are left there. And so far as I understand, only a few went southwards and most of the population is still there. And it will take time to drive them all and to make sure that everything is clear. And therefore, it's not something that will happen within a week or two. It will take some months, and we have to be prepared for that.
Indeed, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Arab Palestinians living currently in the Gaza city. And therefore, General Sofrin mentions correctly, it's going to take time to relocate all those different residents of that city. And considering the complexity, does that not challenge Israel's position, considering the mounting pressure and even actions taken by various actors globally against Israel on various levels?
Well, it does, Jonathan, and look how big is the gap between what is being said and shown in the world media about what Israel is doing to the civilians in Gaza, and there are those that are using the terms genocide and so on. And what is really happening in reality. In reality, the reason why the IDF is much slower, the reason the IDF is very cautious in what he is doing is because of those Palestinians. It is because the citizens and the IDF is trying to do everything in order to make them go to a humanitarian areas when they won't be in a fire zone. So it is really an amazing gap between what we see and the reality. From the other side, we also have to remember that the Hamas is doing everything he can to leave them in Gaza because he sees them as his human shields, because he like very much what he sees in the international media, which bring also leaders of some countries to push and press Israel. So it is very complex, as you said, for those various reasons.
What amazes me most is the level to which certain organizations and groups would go in order to alter the picture in Gaza, specifically also with regard to the IPC report. I received some data from the Israeli Foreign Ministry here. I went and researched it myself and did the due diligence necessary to raise it up in our program. And one thing that really shocked me was the fact that the IPC, which is sponsored no less by Canada, the UK, and Germany, has gone out its way to fabricate 182 deaths a day, according to their allegation, in contrast to Hamas, which claims only 6 deaths a day related to so-called starvation, which is also a number that I have my doubts on. But nonetheless, in this context, it just shows the level to which such an organization would then go and also note that they would lower the standards of the entire globe from 30% hunger-stricken regions to 15% and all kind of aspects like that, just to reach the political motivated conclusion that they were seeking. and then go ahead and say there is plausible famine in Gaza. Now, there are a lot of activities that are being done, of course, to counter those aspects, but the level of disinformation, I mean, it's just baffling to see. Now, General Kimmett, I'd like to ask from your perspective, when we're talking about the timeline, so to speak, how long do you see Hamas survive such a vigorous process? And I'm not saying that they're all going to be eliminated, since it is a clan construct with affiliation, of course, to the Muslim Brotherhood and such. But nonetheless, their capacity to assert their power on the other clans is diminishing by the day, and we are seeing this on the ground.
Well, I think the real question is not necessarily when is Hamas going to be eliminated. Like you say, it will never be destroyed. The fundamental question is how long will it take so that in a post-war environment, Hamas will not have the ability to be a leading or the leading political / security organization inside of Gaza. You've just got to accept that Hamas will either change its name or start rebuilding again. But the key issue is to make sure that Hamas is not able to direct the activities inside of Gaza. And in my mind, that's really going to be up more to the other, as you would say, the other clans, but also the Palestinian Authority. But number one, it'll always be there in some form and manner. Number two, you just got to make sure it doesn't have influence, significant influence. And number three, that could take months and months.
Well, the Palestinian Authority needs a reform, and it needs to take responsibility over the vacuum that emerged in a number of locations throughout the so-called West Bank, the districts of Judea, Samaria, particularly northern Samaria, and some sections or villages in the Jordan Valley. The moment it manages to convince that it has the capacity or the prowess to assert its dominance there, the Gaza Strip may become a viable option for it as well to then reemerge there. But it doesn't seem that it's really on the right course at this point in time. We never know what's happening in the future.
A better alternative, or at least an alternative to Hamas. And right now, the Arab world is not stepping in. The Western world is not stepping in. So by process of default, it will probably end up being the PA. Now, some would say that's going from bad to worse. Some would say it's going from bad to not so bad. But there has to be an alternative to Hamas. Otherwise, they will fill the vacuum that is left behind.
Absolutely. Well, a Palestinian Authority rather than the Palestinian Authority. I completely agree. But General Sofrin, let's shift gears to reports on a very interesting operation in the Al-Mena area, Jabal al-Mena, which is just south of Damascus, between routes M5 and the 110, which formerly was used by the Russians as surface-to-air installations, now used by the new interim government in Syria of President Ahmed al-Shara for other purposes. But those installations were apparently targeted and destroyed, according to reports in Syria, pointing a blaming finger towards Jerusalem, despite no one here accepting any responsibility for the allegations.
There's a lot of vagueness about what happened in Syria last night. There are two rumors. The first one is that the Syrians discovered some espionage elements of Israel, and therefore Israel decided to destroy it from the air, and then send commando units to eliminate everything and to take it back home. That's version A. Version B, that was published by Israeli sources, claim that the Turkish are beyond these espionage elements that were aimed to follow what happens with the Israeli forces in the Golan Heights. And therefore, Israel decided to eliminate it and then send the commando units to bring it back home. Anyhow, both versions seem to be what we call matching each other. The fact that the Air Force bombed some area in Jabal Mana, just like you mentioned, which is very close to Damascus, about 40 kilometers from Damascus. And the fact that they sent commando units at night, and the Minister of Defense tweeted that Israeli forces are operating day and night everywhere in the Middle East, giving some hint that maybe implying that Israel is beyond this activity, but nobody really knows what happened there. Of course, they know. We don't know really what happened there, but the fact is that the Israeli bombed this area, Israeli Air Force bombed this area, and later on some command units landed, made some activity, and went back home. That's what we know so far.
Well, General Kavish, meanwhile, there continues to be a siege of sorts on the governorate of Sueda by both Bedouin clans and also the Damascus security forces, of course, in civilian clothing, most of them, operating still. They have essentially conquered 41 villages on the fringes of this governorate. They've destroyed at least 34 of them, with people still indicating that bodies are left scattered in the streets of those villages that were destroyed. 2 of those villages, by the way, are not Druze. They happen to be Christian villages, where 5 churches were also burned to the ground. What is being done to deal with this situation, and to what degree is there a international outcry, if you will, to really ensure that minorities in Syria are safeguarded?
It's a big question, Jonathan. You know, it all goes back to the statement that we did stated more than once, that it would take some time until things would stabilize in Syria, and you know, basically when we're talking about the international community, who is really the international community that is involved there? What are the different interests? It is not that we have a united international community with one main goal that could influence what is happening in Syria. I think that unfortunately, more than anything else, in such a complex situation, in a way, things are being shaped with reality, and everyone around us is looking at it and behaving accordingly and adapting itself to the situation in the ground, which is something that happens a lot in a very complex environments. So I think that basically this is where we are. Of course, from the Israeli point of view, there is a pure interest because we have to remember that Syria was the ground for the Iranian to work and to rearm the Hezbollah. Syria was the ground for the Iranians to arm Israel, to get intelligence against Israel, and now we know even more than in the past that if the Iranian would continue with their plan, Syria would become, in a matter of a few years, another proxy of at least some areas of Syria. This is the vision of Iran, would become another proxy. So when you combine all of those together, the Iranian interest from one side, of course our interest, the Turkish interest, the US interest, and others, it makes this region super complicated. I think that from the Israeli point of view, from the one hand, we have to be very cautious about what is happening there, but then from the other hand, we have to be very proactive when it comes to new involvements that are relevant to the security of Israel, and to work according to the a new strategy, which is prevention, and to prevent or any new threat that would be coming from this area.
Thank you, General Gavish. General Kimmett, I'd like to hear your take on this. Also, from an American perspective, it seems there is continued efforts to bolster the regime in Damascus. Some very senior diplomat, American diplomat, has stated earlier this week that they remain skeptical on whether or not the regime was actually involved in the massacres, despite a lot of evidence that indicates its involvement. And ultimately, when we're talking about sanctions relief, just yesterday, the executive order of President up to revoke, not scrap entirely, since it is a law passed by Congress, but to revoke the so-called Caesar Act, granting the Syrians pretty much the capacity to gain any type of finance to further their aspirations of consolidating power in Syria.
Yeah, well, just to build on Duran's answer to who should we be calling in outrage against the slaughter of not only the Druze, but the Christians. I mean, the obvious answer, disappointingly, is the United Nations. But the United Nations has proved itself absolutely incapable of organizing to the point where they would do anything about this. The fact remains, the only thing second to its anti-Semitic behavior, the UN's anti-Christian behavior, is a far second, but still pretty well documented. I mean, during the entire ISIS campaign, there was no outcry against the slaughter of the Christians of the Yazidis. We see that around the world. We've seen that now inside of Armenia as Azerbaijan is starting to knock down the oldest Christian churches in the world. So I just don't see any. Unfortunately, the answer to Duran's question is the situation that not only is there are people to call, the problem is they're going to take that telephone call and put it on hold. Now, in terms of the United States, it's very simple. The United States is holding its nose diplomatically because it doesn't want to let its morals get ahead of its, what I'd say, its desired outcomes. I have a lot of friends in the commercial side of the house that are rushing to Damascus right now trying to make deals. The United States believes that if they don't and aren't first and strongest on the ground, then the Iranians are going to return or the Russians are going to return. So right now, as my friends would say, Syria is a bit of a hash.
Indeed. Well, I can say, at least from the way I see it right now, Damascus has not consolidated power, not in the Alawite regions, the Kurdish regions, the Druze regions. Most of the regions that are supposedly under control of the Damascus government is not necessarily controlled by the Damascus government, since they don't have the force to actually assert their sovereignty on those. So I don't see this as a great investment. Go ahead, General.
Yeah, I think that we can say with some level of confidence that Damascus is in charge of Damascus. We had the same paradigm in Kabul that we used to call the prime minister and the president the mayors of Kabul. The fact remains is you've got the four corners. You've got a mess in the north that Turkey is managing, a mess in the west where the Druze are the Alawites are under attack there. You've got the Druze in the south, and you've got ISIS in the east. So the fact that Shara is able to control at least Damascus to some people is an accomplishment.
Right. Well, you've got ISIS also in the south, also in Damascus, and also in the north. So it is unfortunately a conundrum that needs to be dealt with, but we'll have to wait and see. We don't have very much time left. In a closing statement by each of you, what are we also expected, if I may insert that into your closing analysis, a Iran that will seek to reinvigorate its entrenchment in Syria. General Sofrin?
I'm sure that Iran has ambitions to get back into Syria and to have dominance in Syria like they did before. But now the Turks are more dominant than the Iranians, and the Syrian regime, at least the current regime, don't want the Iranians back into Syria. They despise them, they don't want them back, and they try to push them away as much as they can. But I want to share one point regarding Iran, and this is what we call the decision of the three European countries, meaning France, UK, and Germany, to activate back the snapback mechanism, which will take about 30 days to imply it and to get it into full capacity. But the fact that they decided means that they understand that the negotiations are at a dead end, and now they have only this option to threaten Iran. And therefore, they decided to activate it, and they share this idea with the Secretary of State of the US, and probably it will be announced tomorrow that they're going to activate it and let the Iranians now begin sweating and running and rushing to a negotiation table to get to some agreement that will stop this process.
Indeed. Well, there's a scoop for all of you at home. Unfortunately, it did come at the expense of an analysis of General Gavish and General Kimmett, but nonetheless, it is very important to highlight, and I'm sure that General Kimmett and General Gavish agree with General Sofrin, that snapback mechanism is necessary. It's a political statement, and it will indeed cause some turmoil within the Ayatollah regime. Half a sentence from each of you, General Gavish.
Well, I think going back to Israel interest, we have to be now very focused in what is happening in the Gaza Strip. This is for the short term for Israel.
General Kimmett.
I agree with General Sofrin. Turkey is going to play more and more of a role inside of Syria. Iran will play less and less.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank General Kimmett, General Gavish, and General Sofrin for all of your valuable insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.